Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another 4-part harmony tutorial video. Today we are dealing with the primary chords in first inversion, and we'll be looking at them in their basic triad format, as well as learning some rules needed to write them in 4-part harmony. I hope this video helps you, and let's just get straight into it. So the first thing we should look at when dealing with first inversions, before taking it to 4-part writing, is its basic triad. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to deal with chord 1 in C major as a root position triad. So our triad here is C, E, G, chord 1. And that is our basic chord 1 root position triad, C, E, and G. Now, the rule to remember with first inversion, and we'll deal with figuring in a second, but the rule to remember here is that you're no longer starting on the root. So we're no longer in root position, but instead we're going to be starting on the third. So again, our triad is still going to be C, E, G, but instead of starting on the C, the root, we're now starting on the E, the third. So there's our E down, and then next comes the fifth. And then we finish off with the C, which was at the bottom below the third, now comes above the fifth, and in this case, that puts us at middle C. So the next thing to remember with first inversions is your figuring. So we've been dealing in previous videos just with chords and cadences in root position. But now we're going to have to change things up a little bit when dealing with first inversion. It really depends on the school that you attend or the syllabus that you follow. But I like to use the ABC system. So root position would technically be called chord 1A, although we actually just, for root position chords, leave that as just the Roman numeral. For first inversion, we would then use the letter B, but in some cases, it's also known as 163 or just simply 16. I like to use A, B, and C. It's just easier that way. And then, just as extra information, when we deal with second inversion chords, which will be in a later video, it would then be chord 1, and the letter would be C. So use the ABC system just because it's easy to remember. Now, of course, you can go ahead and have some fun dealing with chords 4 and chord 5. And in later videos, we'll also deal with secondary substitutions as inversions. But for now, let's just deal with the primary triads. So chord 4 in C major, our triad here is FAC. And chord 5 would be GBD. So again, the same principle applies. Instead of starting on the root, and so the root over here, we would then be starting on the thirds. So in chord 4, the third is A. Now I'm going to take it down over there. And next comes the fifth. And then the F, that would have been just below the A over there, simply rises up above the fifth to the F. And in chord 5, in first inversion, the same principle applies. So we're starting on the B, we're going up to a D, and then the G that would have been below the third simply comes above to the G above the fifth. And there we have the primary triads in first inversion. So let's have a quick listen to that. And as you can hear, it's quite an interesting sound starting on that third. Now, when you deal with chords in first inversion and 4-part writing, we need to remember one simple rule, and that is the doubling. So let's just get into it. Okay, so the next part of this video is us dealing with doubling a triad in first inversion so that we can write it in 4 parts. So I've gone ahead and set up a little exercise here dealing with chord 1 in root position and in first inversion, and then chord 4 in root position and in first inversion. We'll get this down, I'll go through the steps needed, and then we will listen back to it and hear the differences. So, as always, the first thing you should do is get down your working. In the key of C major, chord 1, the triad is C, E, G. And the same triad exists for chord 1 in first inversion. In chord 4, our triad is going to be F, A, C, and the same thing for chord 4 in first inversion. So as we've dealt with in previous videos with cadences, we've been doubling the root. And in this case, we can do the same thing for this chord in root position. So we start on our root, our C, and then what I'll do is I'll do an extended voicing here. So we'll go to a G, and then the third in alto, and finally doubling the root C in the soprano. Now, in first inversion chords, the rules are slightly different. We actually have the option to double our root, but also our fifth. And the reason for this is that when you're dealing with chords in first inversion in terms of longer chord progressions, it all depends on the voice leading, which of course we'll deal with chord progressions in a later video. But we have the option to double the root or the fifth if it will result in better voice leading with our progression. So here I'm going to do chord 1 in first inversion where we double the root. And then in chord 4 later on, in first inversion, I'll deal with doubling the fifth there. So for this one, we're now starting on our third because we are in first inversion. And now we have a few options as to how we go about it, but we're going to double that root. So I'm going to go to C there, and then I'm going to go to a G in the alto, and then finally doubling the root with C in the soprano. So the difference here is now that we're starting on that third, and in this case, the doubling, we can double the root or the fifth. I decided to do the root here. Let's have a listen to these two chords back to back. Okay, so we can hear they've got a lot of similarity, but having that bass start on the third certainly adds quite a nice layer of texture to the chord. It's no longer just a basic root position chord. Alright, for chord 4, this time we're going to double the fifth. So chord 4 in root position, we got to start on an F. And then for this example, I'm going to go to the C for the tenor. And then I'm going to go to an A in the alto. And I'm actually going to double the fifth for chord 4 in root position here. Now, of course, you could write that where you double the F and you could change it around. But I'm going to go ahead and just keep that as doubling the fifth. For chords 4 in first inversion, now we have to start on the A. And then we have a few options. I am going to go with doubling the fifth, so there goes your C. And we're going to then put down an F in the alto. And finally finish off with doubling the C in the soprano. Alright, so let's have a little listen to that. So there we can get a good grasp of what it sounds like to double the fifth. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, let's go back to this root position chord 4 and redo it so that we're not doubling the fifth there. So here we're starting on F again. We can go to a C over here, an A in the alto, and then finally finishing off with the root into the soprano. Nice and high. So here we've doubled the root in this case and no longer the fifth. And for chord 4 in first inversion, I'm going to keep it the same with that doubled fifth, the C, so that we can hear the difference here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like. If you didn't, a dislike, no problem at all. For more videos like this in the future related to music education and potentially some other stuff, consider subscribing as it helps us and it also keeps you up to date with our latest content. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.